Today, the ground of the pattern, the environment in which the pattern is held and developed, because the pattern does not develop in isolation. It develops within a ground, and the quality of the ground determines whether the pattern moves toward physical expression or is interrupted. This is the 7-minute daily focus, day 144 of 365, to focus on the world within from the world without. Today's focus, the law of pattern, the ground of pattern. Pause for a moment. 4 days in, the law of pattern is established, its nature is understood. The thought as the container of the pattern is clear. Today, the ground of the pattern, the environment in which the pattern is held and developed, because the pattern does not develop in isolation. It develops within a ground, and the quality of the ground determines whether the pattern moves toward physical expression or is interrupted. Pause. You understand the ground from the law of germination. The mind is the metaphysical ground. The mind is the metaphysical you, and the quality of the ground is determined by which instrument the mind yields to. The first sense or the 5 senses, primary reality or secondary reality, within or without. Now understand this in the specific context of the pattern. The pattern you carry within the thought requires the correct ground to develop toward its physical expression. The correct ground is the mind yielding to the first sense, the focused mind, the active mind, operating from primary reality. This is the ground of the pattern. Thought is within, effect is without. Thinking stands between. Pause for a moment. Consider what the correct ground does for the pattern. The focused mind, receiving from the first sense, perceives the pattern within. It holds the thought that contains the pattern before the inner sight. It directs thinking upon the pattern with consistency and intention. In this ground, the pattern is held, developed, and moved steadily toward expression. Not because the thinker is forcing it, because the ground is aligned with the nature of what the pattern is, the metaphysical pattern in the metaphysical ground. Primary reality developing primary reality. This is the correct correspondence, and in this correspondence, development occurs. Pause for a moment. Now understand what happens when the ground is not correct. When the mind yields to the 5 senses, it is yielding to a state that has no metaphysical ability, no power to translate the thought into its physical reality. The 5 senses perceive only what has already physically expressed. They perceive the law of the physical, governed by time, space, and matter. They cannot perceive the metaphysical pattern, cannot hold it, cannot develop it. And thinking directed through the 5 senses is thinking directed at secondary reality, at conditions, at what is already expressed. This does not develop the pattern. It strengthens the hold of what is already seen. And the pattern, though still complete within, is interrupted, not destroyed. Interrupted. Pause for a moment. This is why the selection of the ground is not a small matter. It is the most decisive act of the thinker's day. The ground determines whether the pattern develops or is interrupted, and the ground is selected by the thinker, always. It is not assigned by circumstances, it is not imposed by conditions. The thinker chooses which instrument the mind yields to. The first sense or the 5 senses, primary reality or secondary reality, and that choice determines the environment in which the pattern either develops or waits. Pause. The morning practice is the daily act of selecting the correct ground, before the 5 senses have set the agenda for the day, before conditions have spoken. before secondary reality has presented its report. The thinker returns within, opens the first sense, yields to primary reality, and in yielding establishes the correct ground for the pattern. This is the first function of thinking operating precisely, selecting the ground. And from that selection, the second function, the development of the pattern, proceeds. Pause. The ground of the pattern is also sustained through the day. The morning selection is the establishment, but the correct ground requires maintenance, not constant effort, consistent return. When conditions speak and the mind drifts toward the five senses, the return to within restores the correct ground. Immediately, the pattern has not changed, the ground is restored, and development resumes from exactly where it was. Not from the beginning, from where it was. The ground of the pattern is always available. The return to it is always possible. Not doubtfulness, not struggle, not force. You are not pushing the seed. Not pressure. You are not trying to make it happen, but steadfastness, focused. Remain aligned with what is within. Do not be moved by what is physically seen, because what is physically seen is always secondary to what is unfolding. Now, the affirmation for day 144. Pause for a moment. I select the correct ground for the pattern each morning before the five senses have spoken. Before conditions have set the agenda, I yield to the first sense. I yield to primary reality. I establish the focused mind as the ground in which the pattern is held, the metaphysical pattern in the metaphysical ground. This is the correct correspondence, and in this ground, the pattern is developed. The thought that contains the pattern is held before the first sense. Thinking is directed upon it. The development proceeds, and because the correct ground is operating, the pattern moves toward expression, and because it moves toward expression, it unfolds. And what unfolds must physically express, remember, by design, by focus.